A couple of weeks ago, I posted a video on the leadership contest of the Green Party of England and Wales. In that video, I said it would likely be the most important UK-wide leadership contest of this year. That was carefully selected language, because I don't think it's going to be the most important leadership contest in the UK. I think that superlative goes to its sister party, the Scottish Greens. Because while the Green Party of England and Wales is a growing minor party, the Scottish Greens is a former and potentially future party of government. In this video, I will take you through the history of the party, the context for this leadership contest, the rules and procedures, and then finally, the candidates. Just like my last leadership contest video, I reached out to the candidates and I actually managed to secure interviews with 3 out of 4 of the candidates who've shared their leadership vision with me for this video. And so without further ado, let's get into it, and we'll begin with the history. The Scottish Greens emerged from the Green Party UK in 1990 alongside the Green Party of England and Wales and the Green Party Northern Ireland. The Scottish Greens had their first big breakthrough in 1999 in the first Scottish Parliament election when this guy, Robin Harper, became their first MSP. They would continue to win seats in subsequent Scottish Parliament elections. In 2003 they won 7 seats, and in 2007 they had a relatively poor election but still held on to 2 seats. During this period they made some minor gains in council elections but did not win any European Parliament or Westminster seats. The Scottish Parliament election in 2007 began the Scottish Greens' climb to genuine influence. It saw the Scottish National Party form a minority government under Alex Salmond, which the Scottish Greens supported in exchange for green policy measures. The good feelings dissipated a bit, and in 2009, disagreements between the two parties led to a minor political crisis when the Greens voted against the SNP's budget. In the 2011 election, the Greens returned 2 MSPs again, but this parliamentary term led to the Greens becoming a more prominent voice in Scottish politics when they joined the pro-independence campaign for the 2014 Scottish independence referendum. The party's involvement in the referendum campaign led to a surge in membership and helped the party win 6 MSPs in the following 2016 Scottish election, and it kept their profile high going into the 2021 election when they secured their best result so far with 8 seats. They continued to improve their performance in council elections, again still without success in the European or UK parliaments. But following the 2021 election, where the SNP was a mere single seat away from forming the first majority government, the Scottish Greens found their way into the heart of political power through the Bute House Agreement. After the election, Scottish Greens co-leaders Patrick Harvie and Lorna Slater signed an agreement with the then SNP First Minister Nicola Sturgeon. This was a power-sharing agreement, not exactly a coalition. Under the agreement, both Harvie and Slater would serve as junior ministers, and the two parties agreed on a shared policy programme, including very ambitious green targets. This gave the government an effective majority. When Nicola Sturgeon resigned in 2023 and was replaced by Humza Yousaf, the agreement was renewed. However, throughout the power-sharing agreement, quite a few shared policy goals were scrapped, most prominently a highly protected marine area designation and a plastic and aluminum container deposit return scheme. During this time, the controversial gender recognition reform, which would see a significant liberalisation of self-ID, was celebrated by the Greens but caused growing discontent amongst the SNP's more socially conservative wing. The bill was passed but was later effectively vetoed by the UK government. And this all came to a head in 2024 when a perfect storm led to First Minister Humza Yousaf rather ruthlessly ending the Bute House Agreement. The two parties had, in the preceding days, disagreed very publicly on green targets and the recently published CAS review, an independent public review that was critical of gender services for young people. This in turn lost Yousaf his parliamentary majority, and so he was forced to resign as well. He was replaced by John Swinney, who seems to have patched relations with the Scottish Greens, for example working with them and the Scottish Liberal Democrats on the 2025 budget. So now let's turn to the context. The Scottish Greens hold leadership contests every 2 years, but if the incumbents stand for re-election, these are oftentimes quite unexciting affairs. However, earlier this year, Patrick Harvie announced he would not be standing again after having served as co-leader and under the preceding title of co-convener since 2008. This comes at an interesting time for the Scottish Greens. Although they fluctuate significantly, polls currently have the party on course to pick up more seats in next year's Scottish election. They could very well be on course to once again be a potential key for the SNP to reach a pro-independence majority. However, the party has some significant challenges too. The new, yet unnamed left-wing party founded by Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana is reportedly planning to stand candidates in next year's Scottish election, which may eat into the Scottish Green vote. Additionally, the last few weeks and months have seen some internal discontent within the party. Activist grassroots members have aired their frustration with what they see as departures from the anti-establishment and populist approach that they wish for the party to take. This all came around the same time as the party was choosing candidates for next year's election, which saw activist challenges to the current MSPs, though most incumbents ended up on the top of their respective regional party lists. There was reporting that this faction would stand a candidate in this contest. However, this never came to pass, with the faction's perhaps most likely candidates of Anthony Carroll and Ellie Gomersall both declining to stand. So let's quickly look at the process. The Scottish Greens have a co-leadership structure where they always have two leaders. Of these two leaders, at least one must be a woman. There is no requirement for leaders to be MSPs or even hold elected office. The vote is conducted via a single transferable vote system where party members will be asked to rank the candidates. If this leads to two men being elected, the poorer performing of the two will be eliminated in favour of the best performing female candidate, though this has not been a necessary procedure in recent contests. Ballots open on the 13th of August, they close on the 22nd, and the new leadership team will be announced on the 29th of August. And so, without further ado, let's turn to the candidates. There are 4 candidates standing in this election. I'll take you through them by alphabetical order of their surnames, starting with Dominic Ashmole. Dominic Ashmole is the dark horse in this race. He's the only non-MSP candidate. He is a research and development manager who has stood for the party on a couple of occasions, both in the 2022 council election and the 2024 general election, where he stood in the Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale and Tweedale constituency. Ashmole has made the argument that the co-leadership nature of the party structure lends itself well to having one of the co-leaders positioned outside of the parliament, where they can work with the public, the grassroots, and the party councillors. To get more details about his candidacy, I spoke to him, and here is the interview. Lovely. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview. I'm going to just start off with quite a broad question. Why have you decided to stand for leader of the Scottish Greens?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think my goal is to challenge the party to speak more plainly about the really difficult times ahead and to demand emergency action at Holyrood, but also in wider society in response to the collapse of climate and nature. And with the Greens having the luxury of 2 co-leaders, we can actually turn this to an advantage. So I'm not going to be an MSP. So with a colleague in Holyrood, focused on delivery there, I can work directly with the public, with civic society, and with our councillors across the country to help accelerate and scale up the change that we so urgently need.
Obviously, a big part of the Green Party of the last couple of years has been dominated by the Bute House Agreement. In your view, sort of, what were the big wins that the Green Party got out of the Bute House Agreement? And if you were to be elected leader, are there any lessons that you'd sort of take away from that experience about how to go into the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was in favour of the Bute House Agreement, and I think we actually did gain a lot. We gained a great deal of credibility as the first Green Party in the UK to go into government. Lorna and Patrick naturally got large sort of staff teams as junior ministers in order to enact the kind of policies that our voters had voted for. And, you know, with about 10% of the popular vote, you've got to be realistic. You won't get the whole of your manifesto through. And I think they worked tirelessly and very hard to try and get value for those Green votes. So I'm proud of and happy with the work that they did. Lessons that you learn are, of course, that you disappoint because you can't get the whole of your manifesto through as a minority party. Equally, you need to know what your red lines are, and I think when the legally binding climate targets in Scotland were abruptly abandoned, admittedly because they clearly could not be met, I think that came as too much of a surprise to members, and there wasn't a credible enough alternative message to kind of explain and to say what was going to be done instead. And I think, as I've been saying across my social media posts, the global situation is not really any more under political control. The IPCC predictions are of utterly catastrophic global warming over, the few decades ahead, with 2 degrees of warming expected by 2040 and 4 degrees by the end of the century. These are things that will render large areas of the Earth uninhabitable to humans, with perhaps 3 billion people displaced or living in uninhabitable lands. And we need to be getting real with the public about this and talking to our communities, encouraging them to prepare, getting them to realize that no matter how much adaptation they do locally, whether that's wildfires or preparing for food shortages, that actually climate change is real, political control is not underway, and that they need to be giving a much, much stronger steer to politicians in Scotland and globally to solve this.
Brilliant, thank you. And obviously, a way that the Green Party can exert more influence in that way is to have a really, really good election in 2026. So if you were to be elected leader, what would be your approach to going into next year's Scottish election?
That's a really interesting one, and I pay tribute to the current co-leaders and current MSP team and the other party bodies who've crafted our campaign strategies. Realistically, the way that you get to voters is you have 2 or 3 clearly understood, crisp, summary kind of policies that you just hammer away at, and things like the free bus travel for under 22s that we've had. Now, if you can come in with a policy that is universal free bus travel, that's great. Assistance for insulating homes. These kind of policies link climate mitigation with poverty, inequality, and so on, and they're very powerful electoral policies and genuinely valuable. So that level of simplicity of communication, I support that. But what I would like to add is a commitment to reality, and that's why my grassroots campaigning that would follow over the subsequent 5 years, going into town halls, explaining and communicating with people that we need to rise up and deal with this ourselves, because the political system is not capable of fully rising to this challenge unless a much bolder political agenda is empowered by the kind of votes that people are prepared to cast.
It sounds almost like you're kind of linking next year's election also with the 2027 council election that's coming up. Is there sort of, are you doing like is it a wider push in terms of just general election strength for the party that you'd be pushing?
Well, yes, but that's always the case, and the election cycle in Scotland is like that. Unlike in England and I think in Wales, we're on a regular cycle. All of our councillors turn over every 5 years, and it's always a year after the Holyrood election. So we definitely build to our council election through our Holyrood campaigning, and certainly we'll be wanting to see. At the moment, we have large council representation in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and more dispersed and representation in smaller scale across the rest of the country. And we definitely want to increase that. When you get 2, 3, 4, or even a dozen Green councillors, you can really start to make an impact, or you can even find yourself in the administration rather than in opposition. So yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. The Greens believe in decentralization and local action, and through councils you can get a lot done. I guess again, what I'm adding is we need to see the third sector. We need to see environmental entrepreneurs, community supported endeavors, perhaps voluntary local taxation from people who can afford to try and rise up to this challenge and meet it beyond what the current political system seems to be capable of.
Thank you. And just the final question, you'll be aware that there's been in the press a bit of sort of discontent with perhaps the more grassroots activist base of the party. And I know that this was covered in the hustings a couple of days ago as well. And I'm just curious, what would be your approach to making sure that the party is united going into the next couple of years if you were to be elected leader?
Yeah, what to say. I mean, our job and our mission is not really about personalities. It's about trying to address inequality and address really catastrophic destruction and very bad outcomes. And I think we're all in different places in our lives and in our careers, and of course we're all very passionate, and that can lead to conflict or to upset. But I think all of us are capable of essentially rising above that when we continue to come back to what our mission is, continue to have expectations or assumptions of everyone's good intentions, And also just to check in and think, what am I personally trying to achieve here? Um, so I don't think it's not a situation where big personalities are needed, however useful that might be in terms of communication. It's a situation, we are a democratic party, we are a grassroots party, and we expect to win together.
Now let's turn to Ross Greer. Ross Greer is a Scottish Green MSP for the West Scotland region. He was first elected in 2016 at the age of 21, becoming the youngest ever MSP. After the 2021 election, he played a key role in managing the Bute House Agreement, and he's taken a pragmatic approach to working with the SNP on future agreements. Aside from being a very successful campaigner on very classic Green Party policies, Greer has also put an emphasis on his campaign around improving working and volunteering conditions within the party. I spoke to Greer about his candidacy. Here is that interview. Hi, Ross. Thank you so much for doing this. My first question is kind of broad. It's why have you decided to stand for co-leader?
I've been a member of the Scottish Greens since I was in high school. There were more students at my high school than there were members of our party when I joined. So I've seen a huge growth, a transformation in the party in the 16 years that I've been a member. But I'm really concerned that in that same period of time in Scottish politics, the sense of hope that this can be a fairer and a greener country has all but disappeared. It's been drained out of our politics by right-wing forces, by centrists who've let people down. And I think that the Scottish Greens can be the party to bring that hope back for people. We can bring that sense of a positive future for this country. And to do that, we need to be able to tell people stories that are honest. So many people in this country are angry right now. They are angry at how hard their life is, how difficult it is just to cover the costs of their life, cover their bills. And it's not the fault of asylum seekers or trans people that folks' lives are so difficult, but it is someone's fault. It's the fault of billionaires, of tax avoiders, of polluting companies, of greedy landlords. And the Scottish Greens are the only party who will be honest enough to say that. And we're the only party who are focused on the solutions to the kind of crises that the super rich have caused. So I want us to go into next year's election relentlessly focused on a small set of policies that are easy to understand, that tackle the climate crisis and the cost of living crisis. So I want us to focus on policies like expanding free bus travel to absolutely everyone. Half the country already get it. We were the ones who delivered it for young people. I want us to focus on the universal rollout of free bus travel in Scotland, because that will both tackle the climate emergency and the cost of living emergency.
Thank you. Well, obviously you played quite a key role in the Bute House Agreement. So I was wondering, what is sort of, in your mind, the biggest victory that the Scottish Greens got out of participating in that agreement?
Victories from the Bute House Agreement were the policies that have changed people's lives. We could talk about the fact that our party had record local election results while we were in government, almost doubled our number of councillors, that we polled higher than we've ever done before while we were in government, and we're continuing to poll even higher than that now. So clearly being in government was good for our party and public perceptions of us. We came under a huge amount of attack from those powerful vested interests that we were challenging, but it was good for us. The most important thing, though, was that we actually delivered what we said we would. Children have been lifted out of poverty as a result of the Scottish Greens being in government. We set up Scotland's first ever nature restoration fund. That's not only protecting and preserving the local environment and our native species, it's creating jobs across rural Scotland as well. We wiped out the school meal debt held by thousands of struggling families across the country. We expanded free school meals. We delivered an emergency rent freeze and protections from eviction for renters during the height of the cost of living crisis. And we've put that bill before Parliament to deliver permanent rent controls. Now, the SNP might be watering that down now, but it wouldn't be happening at all if it wasn't for the Scottish Greens. So you can see the transformational impact of having Greens in government. People across Scotland are better off. Our natural environment is better off as a result of having the Greens in government. And we can be really, really proud of those achievements. And I think it's an experience that made our party stronger as well. Of course, being in government is a difficult experience, and frankly, it should be, but it is a huge learning experience for those who are involved. We are a more effective party. We are more effective at delivering change in Scotland now than we were before that experience of being in government. I have friends who would have been homeless if it wasn't for the emergency eviction protections that we brought in. So I know just how meaningful those changes were, and there's no doubt in my mind that they wouldn't have happened without the Greens being in government. One very topical change is that at the start of September, peak fares will be permanently removed from ScotRail. That would not have happened if the Greens weren't in government. We delivered the first year's trial of that. It increased journeys on our trains by 10 million. So it was an effective climate policy, and it was helping people cut the cost of their daily lives. That wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the Greens and the rail unions who campaigned so hard for it. So the evidence of the impact is really clear. And I'm absolutely confident that our party has become stronger and more effective as a result of that experience.
Sort of moving on to a bit of a different question. There's obviously been a bit of sort of discontent within the activist grassroots base of the party that sort of made its way into the media. I saw that you have a bit of a plan of reorganizing the party and trying to sort of quell those more personal issues. So I was wondering, could you sort of talk us through that a bit?
The Scottish Greens are a radical democracy, and radical democracies can only exist and thrive if there's a certain level of trust and respect. And I think we can all be honest that that's something that we've struggled with internally in our party over the last couple of years. And it's because of the behaviour of a very, very small number of people, but it's really corrosive to an internal democracy that members are afraid to contribute their ideas on our internal discussion forums because they're worried that it's going to end up on the front page of the next day's newspapers, because that's happened so often in the last couple of years. So there's a very specific issue there. More widely, though, I think part of the challenge that we face is that, frankly, we spend far too much time in the Scottish Greens speaking to each other. We have what I believe is a radical bureaucracy that masquerades as a radical democracy. I don't think it's radically democratic if to be actively involved in running our national party, you have to make such a huge commitment of your time that it's automatically inaccessible to a lot of people, particularly people with caring responsibilities. So I want us to focus on, frankly, having fewer meetings where we talk to each other, where we focus on getting actions out of those meetings, where we don't reopen the decisions made at the previous meeting as soon as we get to the next one, because I want us to focus on actually going out and speaking to voters and winning support for the kind of transformational change that we believe is necessary. So one of the things that I want to do is, yes, reduce the amount of meetings that we have in our party. And I want us to take the focus back to our branches. Branches should be really the powerhouse of our party. But I think we suck far too many people into running the national party. You know, loads of volunteers who can make a huge contribution running their local branch, which should be the most important bit of the Scottish Greens. But we constantly twist people's arms to fill the many, many vacancies we've got in our national party. I don't think that's good for those individuals. Far too many people get burnt out as a result of that. And it's not good for our branches as well. And what I want is a kinder and a more forgiving culture within the party as well. When I was co-chair of the party, had to accept the resignations of far too many national office bearers, particularly committee conveners of our elections committee in particular, who felt that as soon as they had taken up that post, certain other activists just automatically saw them as the enemy, and that there was a real assumption of bad faith on their part. The code of conduct of our party says that we should assume the best of each other, that we should assume good intentions, and I want us to really get back to that. So I want us to improve our culture, and I want us to recognise that our processes and our structures are actually contributing towards quite a bad culture at the moment. We spend too much time talking to each other, and our processes are often frustrating, deficient, hard to understand, and that just creates more anger and sometimes results in the kind of unacceptable behaviour that we need to draw a line under. I'm confident that we're beginning to move out of that in terms of just how we behave with each other. I think what we need to look at now are the structural changes to the party that will help us move further beyond that. And for me, it's about far more support for branches and reducing the amount of time that people have to come together to have the same meetings about the same topics over and over again at national level.
Terrific. Let's now look at Gillian Mackay. Gillian Mackay is an MSP for the Central Scotland region. She was first elected in 2021 and is best known for a private member's bill which she managed to get successfully passed through the Scottish Parliament. This was the Safe Access Zones Bill, which creates buffer zones around abortion clinics, where it's illegal for people to take actions that could prohibit other people from accessing abortion services. This includes protests, harassments, and silent prayers. This bill received international attention and was condemned by US Vice President J.D. Vance. However, in Scotland, the bill received backing from all parliamentary political parties. During this campaign, Mackay has focused primarily on economic issues and appears to have become the more anti-establishment and activist wing of the party's go-to candidate. Unfortunately, I was not able to get in touch with Mackay or her campaign. But let's now finally turn to Lorna Slater. Lorna Slater is an MSP for the Lothian region and one of the incumbent co-leaders of the Scottish Greens. She was first elected co-leader in 2019 before she became an MSP. Slater was then elected to the Scottish Parliament in 2021. As co-leader, she played an integral part of the Bute House Agreement, where she served as Minister for Green Skills, Circular Economy, and Biodiversity. Try to say that 3 times fast. In this role, she spearheaded the push for the highly protected marine areas and the deposit return scheme, both initiatives that were later scrapped to the displeasure of the Scottish Greens. Her campaign is one focused on expanding the influence that the Scottish Greens have gained over the last few years under her co-leadership. I spoke with her and asked her a few questions about her campaign.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time for this interview, Lorna. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to start with, why is it that you've decided to stand for re-election for co-leader?
It's been such a privilege to be co-leader of the Scottish Greens now for 6 years. And during that time, we've had so much success as a party. We've increased our number of MSPs. We've increased the number of councillors. We've gone from being a small but effective party to being a significant force in Scottish politics, including our first stint in government, where we really showed what Scottish Greens in government can actually do. Of course, the disappointment for many of us is that the SNP, without the Greens there to keep pushing them in that direction of building a fairer, more progressive, greener Scotland, have rolled back on so many of their promises, watering down rent controls, stepping back on LGBTQ plus rights, stepping back on nature restoration, on ambition for things like heat in buildings, for insulating and building warm homes in Scotland. And this is why I want to be co-leader again, so that we can continue to build on our success, continue to hold the SNP's feet to the fire, and make sure that, point out to them where they can be better, make the SNP better, because we know that they have lost confidence in their ambition since the Greens have left government.
Thank you. Well, you were obviously talking about it there. You played a very key role in the Bute House Agreement. You were a minister in the government that came from it. So I'm wondering, sort of, what do you take as the biggest victory that the Scottish Greens achieved by being part of that agreement?
The biggest things that the Scottish Greens achieved by being part of government was to show that we can be a party of government, that we are able to make the tough choices, that we understand the compromises, but at the same time, we aren't afraid to put forward a bolder vision. Things like implementing rent controls, a national upgrade to our recycling structure, putting in place protections for tenants during that cost of living crisis, rolling out more free school meals, free bus travel for everyone under 22. We made changes that matter in Scotland. They put more money in people's pockets, and they're going to matter for a long time. So what we've achieved as Greens in that time is making sure people know that when you vote Scottish Green, you're making a difference, and it's going to make a difference to you, whether that means your kid gets free bus travel, or your kid gets a free school meal, or you're the recycling in your town or city is going to be improved. That things get better when you vote Scottish Green.
And obviously, the way that the agreement ended was probably very disappointing to you and the rest of the Scottish Greens. What is the sort of biggest lesson that you and the party took away from the experience of being in government and sort of the way it ended?
The way the Bute House Agreement ended was largely a question of parliamentary arithmetic. The SNP are a broad church. There are only at that time 7 Greens in the Scottish Parliament. So if the SNP had more than 7 backbenchers who were rebelling against that progressive, greener, fairer, LGBTQ plus rights agenda, which is what we were working towards, because honestly, it was the privilege of my life to be part of a proudly progressive government, to stand by Humza Yousaf as he talked about the atrocities in Gaza and the things his Palestinian family were suffering. But there are SNP members of Parliament who didn't support that progressive vision, and unfortunately, they sort of took it upon themselves to dismantle that agenda. I think the lesson that we've learned is that although we had a pro-independence majority in the Scottish Parliament, we didn't actually have a parliamentary majority for climate action. We didn't actually have a parliamentary majority for the kind of progressive change that we know we need, and that is disappointing. But the SNP may be drifting away from that back toward the centre. They may, Labour and you can see the Tories are being pulled into that more right-wing reform agenda. But the Scottish Greens, we're still here. We still have the same values. We still believe in the same things, and we will be pitching that to voters again next year. The Scottish Greens are the voice of progressive politics in Scotland.
You were already sort of on to my next question there, but what is your sort of approach to 2026? Obviously, some polls have the Scottish Greens way ahead of where you are right now, but there's also, I read, rumours that the Corbyn Sultana party might end up standing in Scotland, which might pose a threat to you guys. How do you sort of view that?
We'll see how any new parties get set up or function in Scottish politics. We have seen an assortment of, small left-wing parties, the Scottish Socialist Party. There was a party called Rise that came up a few years ago, Tusk. There have been small left-wing parties in Scotland, but what they don't have is any sort of basis of experience and that developed volunteer base and connection with voters. The Scottish Greens have had members in the Scottish Parliament from the very beginning, every single term of Parliament. We have a track record of delivering. We have councillors all over the country who are delivering for their communities, making things better for the people of Scotland. So we have that history, that track record, and those significantly hardworking volunteers who get out there, knock on doors, get things done. So we have that basis for growth, and we've been so successful so far that we can build on the successes that we have. And I am very excited about going into the next parliamentary election for our prospects. But also, obviously, we're all looking at the rise of reform. We're looking at the Conservatives have been substantially pulled to the right. We're seeing out and out climate denial in the parliamentary chamber. Huge hostility from the Conservatives toward trans people. And then, of course, the Scottish Labour Party has been dragged in that direction, being much more hostile to trans people, talking about, picking up Keir Starmer's lines on migration and things which we haven't had before in the Scottish Parliament. So as those parties move more and more to the right, it creates more space for those of us on the left who are unashamed to say, yes, the rich need to pay more taxes. If we want Scandinavian levels of public services, we have to pay Scandinavian levels of taxes. It's okay to tax the rich. It's okay to want every child in Scotland to get a healthy meal at lunch. Like, these things shouldn't be considered radical.
Brilliant. And then sort of the last question I have for you is, obviously in the press recently, there's been a little bit of discontent shown by some members of the more grassroots activist base of the party. I just wonder, sort of, if you're re-elected as leader, how would you approach the issue of sort of party unity post the leadership contest?
It's one of those great things about the Scottish Greens is that we are a democratic party, and everyone in the party is passionate, has lots of different opinions. So we bring those to debate, whether that's during internal selections process, during our annual conferences, where any member can get up, bring a policy point and debate that. And we debate those energetically. It doesn't mean that we're not unified and on the same side. We are sharing a vision for a fairer and greener Scotland. We stand up 100% for things like trans rights, for proper climate action, against the kind of extractive capitalism. We all stand on the same sides of those things. It is only right that we debate intensely and passionately with each other. That is part of how we work and what we do. And I absolutely would not want to stop us from doing that.
And that's it, all 4 candidates. So let's turn to the conclusion. The Scottish Greens are a small party, and it's incredibly difficult to predict how internal elections in small parties turn out. Lorna Slater may have an incumbency advantage and be helped by the successes of the party over the past few years. Ross Greer's impressive name recognition and pragmatism may push him over the edge. Gillian Mackay may get a boost from the activist base, and Dominic Ashmole's appeal to councillors and organisers may help him along. It'll therefore be really interesting to see which way things go. Are you a Scottish Green member or supporter? Who do you think will or should win the contest? And where do you think the Scottish Greens will go after next year's Scottish Parliament election? Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, I'd also really appreciate it if you'd give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more like this, please consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much, and goodbye.